In today's lesson, we're going to look at the punctuation section from the Department for Education and Skills literacy paper. Now, in this section, we have to make 15 changes to a piece of writing. Very often it's a letter from a school, and that's exactly what it is that we have today. We have to make sure that all of the punctuation is correct, and there are many missing pieces of punctuation, missing punctuation marks. So the first one in this extract is quite easy, being honest. Firstly, you can see that this is definitely a question. Do you have some spare time? And we know that because the auxiliary verb do and the subject you are inverted. And this is a signal that we're asking a question. And so they've got the first one right. They've got a question mark right at the end of it. Now have a look at the next sentence. Are you willing to give the school a helping hand? Now again, we have the auxiliary verb and the subject. They have swapped places. It's not you are willing, which would just be an ordinary positive sentence. It's are you willing? So we certainly need a question mark at the end of the sentence. But you should be able to see that, and you should see that it looks very bare without the question mark. And so that's a signal that something is missing, and it can't be a full stop because it is a question, and we can see that from the start of the sentence. So do read each sentence carefully, otherwise you could possibly miss that and put a full stop instead. Now let's carry on to the main, the first paragraph. We are looking for volunteers from the community to join us in enhancing the opportunities and experiences of Brookdale School's children. Now, there is a mistake in this sentence. It's nothing to do with the S's at the end of opportunities and experiences. There's no need for any kind of apostrophe here because these are simply plural nouns, opportunities, experiences, and we only use apostrophes to show possession or omission of a letter. In, for example, don't or haven't, you will get an apostrophe where the O has been dropped. But there is an apostrophe needed in this sentence, and the apostrophe must come right here between the L and the S. And the way to understand apostrophes is to think of this this part here, Brookdale School's children. Think of it as the children of Brookdale School. And that's why the apostrophe must go after the L in Brookdale School, not after the S. If you put the apostrophe after the S, it becomes the children of Brookdale Schools. And we're assuming that there's only one school. In fact, we don't need to assume. We can see that there's only one school because the newsletter belongs to Brookdale School. And so they've put the apostrophe in the right place up here, and we need it again down here to show that the children belong to Brookdale School as well. Okay, let's carry on to the next sentence. There are various ways in which you could help as a paired reader. Okay, I've read that a little bit strangely actually, and it's because of the missing punctuation. Let me read it again. There are various ways in which you could help as a paired reader, as a sports coach. I'm going to circle the prepositions here. As a paired reader, as a sports coach or referee, as a chaperone on outings, and by sharing a specialist knowledge you have. Now, I've circled the prepositions because really these prepositional phrases are telling you that you're starting a list. You've got the first prepositional phrase in the list, the next prepositional phrase, and then another one, and then another one at the end. Now, because we're starting a list, we must have a colon here after help. That's what we're missing. We're missing a colon. There are various ways in which you could help, colon. As a paired reader is the first item in the list. Now, they're using semicolons to separate the items in the list. and that is one of the functions of the semicolon. I like to think of the semicolon in this function as a super comma. It's like a comma, but it's used for more complicated lists. Usually it's used for lists which have a comma inside them somewhere, but this one doesn't, and so it's a little bit odd in that sense. But that colon definitely needs to be there before the list. And then we've got a list of 1, 2, 3, and then there is a fourth element on the list. We've got this by sharing a specialist knowledge you have. That's the fourth element on the list. And so we definitely need a piece of punctuation here as well. We need another semicolon. Okay, because we've got one here, we've got one here, we need another one here to make sure that it's clear that by sharing is the next element on the list. It's not part of the previous element on the list. Okay, let's keep going on to the next paragraph. So we've already used a colon, we've used a semicolon, we've got a question mark there, we've also got an apostrophe. All of these punctuation marks we go through on our course. Okay, we're going to go down to the paired reading scheme has been running at Brookdale for 2 years. Now this is the word which is, there's certainly a mistake with this word, and it's because this word, you'll notice that it's always had a capital B before. And that's because it's a name. We call names proper nouns. This Brookdale is a proper noun, so it needs to be a capital B. Okay, it needs to be the paired running scheme has been running at Brookdale with a capital B for 2 years, comma, during which time over 100 children have benefited from the help given to them by volunteers. Okay, that all looks okay. I can't see any problems there. The scheme operates every morning from 9 to 9:30 a.m. Helpers elect to come as many mornings as they feel able, and full guidance and training are given. Now I hope you can see here, I'm going to use a different colour, the scheme operates every morning from 9 to 9:30 a.m. That is an independent clause. And this, helpers elect to come to as many mornings as they feel able, and full guidance and training are given, is another independent clause. So what that's telling us is that unless there's a mistake, and of course there are mistakes, we're trying to correct the mistakes, we can't have two complete independent clauses just sitting together. That would be a run-on sentence if you have that, and that is of course a mistake. So we need to change this sentence. I mean, it's quite easy to miss because they have actually got a full stop here after the AM. But because of the dot between the AM, it doesn't look so obvious. But it is the end of the first independent clause, and so we need to make helpers into a capital letter. We need a capital H there for helpers. Okay? I think the rest of that sentence looks okay, so we'll leave the rest of that. But the full stop was already there, so that doesn't count as one of the 15 extra punctuation marks that you're putting in. But the capital letter certainly does count. Okay, so let's carry on to the next sentence. Pupils' responses have been almost wholly positive. Now, let's hold our horses there and just look at pupils' responses. Now, here, we're really talking about the responses of the pupils. Just like earlier we were talking about the newsletter of Brookdale School, and we needed that apostrophe. And we talked about the children of Brookdale School, and we needed that apostrophe. Now we're talking about the responses of the pupils. And that means we need an apostrophe. But the question is, where do we put the apostrophe? Do we put the apostrophe before the S, in which case it means the response of the pupil? Or do we put the apostrophe after the S, in which case it means the responses of the pupils? Now, of course, it is the responses of the pupils, and so we must put that apostrophe after the S, not before the S. This is very similar to the expression, to the the name Parents' Evening. With Parents' Evening, we always put the apostrophe after the S, and it's because it's the evening of the parents and not the evening of the parent. Yeah, it must be Parents' Evening with the apostrophe right there after the S. If you put it before the S, then it means the evening of the parent, and that's not correct. And the same here. It's the responses of the pupils, not the responses of the pupil. And so we put the apostrophe after the S to make that clear. Okay, so the responses of the pupils have been almost wholly positive, one 12-year-old recently said. However, we've then got, I thought I'd never be able to read. So that's what the one 12-year-old recently said. So again, we've got two main clauses here. This is a main clause. Pupils have been almost wholly positive. And this is the second main clause. One 12-year-old recently said, I thought I'd never be able to read. And the whole rest of the text is what the one 12-year-old recently said. And so that's telling us that we definitely need a full stop here. And if we need a full stop here, we need a capital O for one 12-year-old. So that's another change. We needed to change change the small letter into a capital letter. We need to add a full stop. And also, we need a comma for direct speech. We're quoting what the 12-year-old said, and so we do need that comma before the speech. That's certainly necessary. However, I did spot one more mistake here, and I think a lot of you out there will have also spotted this mistake, even though it's not on the answers for the Department for Literacy and Skills paper. So I think they've missed this one. Shame on them. They should have a hyphen here. One 12-year-old, you need a hyphen between year and old and a hyphen between 12 and year, because this is a compound noun. And these compound nouns, when there's no S on the word year, they always need hyphens between the 12, the year, and the old. You need two hyphens there. So that's one that the paper missed. And that does happen. It only shows you that mistakes happen all the time. And so that's something else. There are really 16 mistakes in this piece of text, and not just 15. Okay, so there were a lot of mistakes in that line. We had a full stop, a capital letter, a hyphen, and a comma before the part that we're quoting. Okay, let's carry on to what the 12-year-old recently said. He said, I thought I'd never be able to read, comma, but thanks to Mrs. Davis, comma, who has been helping me for 8 months. Now that who has, this isn't who's in any other sense. It's not who is. You can't say who is been helping me. It must be who has been helping me, which means we've omitted a few letters, which means we certainly need an apostrophe here as well. We have to say who's been helping me, and we have to add that apostrophe to show that this is who has been helping me for 8 months. And there's a second point here as well, although maybe I'll quickly deal with the other apostrophe for omission. I have just read. Any missing letters need that apostrophe, so there should be an apostrophe between I and the VE to show the omission of the H and the A. I've just read. But there's one more point on this line, and that's we've started a non-defining relative clause. Something that we study on this course is defining and non-defining relative clauses. This is a non-defining relative clause because we're not defining which Mrs. Davis. It's simply extra information about Mrs. Davis, which is why we use a comma here, but we also need a comma at the end of the non-defining relative clause to show where the main clause starts. And the main clause starts here with I have just read, The Magician's Nephew, and The Silver Chair, all on my own. So we definitely need that comma in there as well. If we look at the last line, We've got The Magician's Nephew, which all looks good because it's got the inverted commas around the title of the book. We don't need a comma here, by the way, and it's simply because this sentence reads well without the comma. And what I mean is that the object of read is the magician's nephew and the silver chair. And because it runs into the sentence nicely, we don't need a comma. We can't say that about the previous comma here. We can't say 1 12-year-old recently said. It doesn't complete the sentence nicely. If it's said that, very often you drop the comma. But we've just said you need that comma in there because it grammatically it doesn't complete the sentence. However, this one does, so there's no comma. I've just read The Magician's Nephew without a comma and the silver chair. Now look, they've missed an inverted comma, so we need to put one on this side of the silver chair. And also, they've only used a little s, and this is the name of a book. It's a title, so we need a capital letter. For titles, they are proper nouns and they need capital letters, which is why The Magician's Nephew has a capital T, a capital M and a capital N. So that is the last mistake there. We need that capital S. But you can see they're testing many different punctuation marks, and there is actually a lot of grammar in this small extract that they're testing. Not just apostrophes, but colons, semicolons, commas, commas with direct speech. Sometimes they don't actually have a comma, as we can see when we just quote the title, because that fits in nicely to the sentence. And so it is a difficult paper. But as long as you're prepared and you study, you revise the usage of all of these punctuation marks, you shouldn't actually find it too difficult. And anyway, please do realise that everybody makes mistakes, and so that's why they're missing that hyphen there, which definitely has to be there. It's there in all of the dictionaries, and I think that someone's just made a mistake with this paper. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed this short lesson, and there will be many more on the literacy paper coming soon.